Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Louis, what's your strategy for buying rentals?
So my strategy has evolved throughout the whole years, and it started buying turnkey properties. And now I've kind of, with all the relationships, networking, and knowledge that I've attained, I've been more focused on the BRRRR strategy nowadays.
That's not a bad strategy. Start out with some easy properties, get some experience, and then move into properties that are going to require more work. Louis has a great story. He's got a full-time job. He's buying rental properties in his spare time, and the rentals are making him $18,000 a month. So on the show today, we're going to figure out how he's doing this. We'll talk about how Louis built his portfolio. We'll take a look at his numbers, and we're also going to figure out where Louis has found is the best place to find great tenants. Joining us on the show today from New York is Louis Urena. We'll take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back, and we'll talk to Louis. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property, and when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056.
Rental Income Podcast.
Louis, I want to get your opinion on something before we start the interview. So I've talked to a few people recently that want to buy rental properties, but what's holding them back is that they're afraid about what's happening with the economy. They're afraid things are maybe going to be worse in the future, or they think interest rates are too high or prices are too high. And they're waiting for this mythical time in the future when the economy is going to be great, prices are going to be low, interest rates are going to be low, and everything's going to line up perfectly. And I feel like that mythical time is never going to happen. There's always going to be some fear and uncertainty, and the only thing you can really control is getting a good deal where the numbers work. What do you think about that?
I 100% agree with you. I mean, the term that throws around in our industry, analysis paralysis. I was victim. Well, I don't want to be too dramatic, but yes, I was one of those. And at the end of the day, no matter how much you want to study and grasp what the market is all about, there's no better way of learning it than just jumping right in and learning as you go.
Yeah, awesome. So how long have you been investing for?
So I've been investing for a little over 3 years now. So today we stand, it's July 24th, and my first deal I started February of 2021. So we're looking at 3.5 years at this point almost.
What does your portfolio look like today?
So today I have 10 small multi-family properties ranging from 4 units up to 3 units per property.
Okay, so how many actual units is that?
So at the time right now, we're looking at 29 units or 29 doors.
Awesome. All right, well, let's take a look at your numbers and kind of figure out how things look on paper. So if you were to add up your rents for your entire portfolio, how much do you bring in every month?
So I sleep with this number in mind every night. It's $47,725 to be exact on a monthly basis.
Okay. And that might vary a little bit depending on if you have vacancy, but that's a pretty good number. So what about your mortgage payments? If you were to add up your mortgages for all of your rentals, how much do you spend every month?
So we're looking at $23,762.
Okay. And then do you have any other expenses like utilities or anything else that you have to pay for?
Yeah, so that number, it's going to vary. So the average I'm looking at is $5,258.
Okay.
And that's going to include electricity because these are multifamily homes. We have a home meter for the exterior lights and the hallways, which I'm going to be responsible for. Water, I am responsible for all the homes, and on top of that, sewer as well. So that number is comprised of mainly those three expenses.
All right, so you've got $18,000 after everything is all said and done on a monthly basis.
Correct.
And are you still working full time?
I am still working full time, yes.
Okay, so do you spend any of that 18,000, or are you like, what are you doing with that money?
So that 18,000, it's just a little small snowball effect. I just keep saving it up. I really don't touch it for my own personal expenses, and I keep saving up for my next deal. So all of that is going straight into my savings.
Okay, so as far as like budgeting for repairs or any expenses that might come up, do you set any of that aside, or do you just pay for that out of the 18,000 when something comes up?
I pay that out of the 18,000. So what I do is each property has its own separate bank account, and I want each property to sustain itself on its own. So each property, some might cash flow $2,000 to $3,000 a month. And if something happens to that particular property, then I'm taking the funds out of that property's bank account.
That's a good way to do it. All right. So you've got a separate bank account for every property.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Now, cash flow is awesome. And $18,000 a month is really good. But a lot of times the equity is something that I don't think we maybe talk enough about, how much money you can create in equity. Like if you were to add up the value for your entire portfolio, how much do you think your portfolio is worth?
So right now, I believe my portfolio will be worth $5,180,000. So 5.18.
Okay.
At the moment.
And how much debt do you have on that?
Currently, we're looking at 3,000.
I'm
sorry,
3 million.
3 million.
3 million. Okay. All right. So you've got 2.1, 2.2 million, something like that in equity.
Yes.
In your building. And so that's not cash that you've put into the deal. So like how much money did you invest into building out your portfolio?
Well, going to the question on what my strategy has been, it's evolved with time. So my first couple of deals, it was just straight turnkey, and all in, we're looking at about 80,000 per property for the first three. So out of pocket, I'm looking at about $240,000 that I started with my first three properties. That pretty much helped snowball and help create the way for the other ones coming in right after.
Okay, so you've invested about $240,000 and you've turned that into over $2 million in equity.
Correct.
Now, you live in a very expensive area in the New York City area. Are you buying real estate in New York City?
I'm actually not, and that's what kind of held me back for so many years. Studying the New York City market, trying to find an entry point, and it kind of felt nearly impossible. And that's where I started exploring out and looking, quote unquote, in my backyard. I wanted to find something driving distance. And the market I found happens to be in Connecticut, Bridgeport to be exact. And it's about an hour drive door to door from my house to there.
How did you find Bridgeport?
It was referrals, a friend of a friend. I had a friend that one day we were just hanging out and he started talking about real estate. And I was going to brush off the conversation and say, yeah, I've looked into it. It's too expensive. But then he talked to me about Bridgeport and how cash flow heavy it was, as we like to say. And it intrigued my interest. And I told him, you know what, connect me with a realtor. Had a conversation with the realtor, opened my eyes, and I was hooked since then.
All right, so let's figure out what you did, because I think it's interesting you were buying turnkeys at first, or, if anyone doesn't know that term, that just means properties that don't need any work. They're ready to go as soon as you buy them. So talk to me about that first property that you bought. How did you find it? And tell me what it was like.
So keep in mind, the current events had a lot to do with it. This was February or January of 2021. So we're still in the thick of the COVID pandemic. And there were a lot of properties that were sitting on the market for days or months. And the real estate market itself was a little hairy. I mean, it was a tough time to scale up and especially to start. And I did have my hesitations at first, but with the guidance and help of my realtor, I felt confident going into it. So we spent about maybe a month in looking into the MLS, going through different websites of Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, looking at all the properties and comparing the market rents to them. And when I saw how much I could cash flow off of just one property, I was pretty much sold. I mean, I looked at my return of investment and I said, all right, just to put a dollar figure into it, if I'm putting about $80,000 into this first property, it looks like I can get my money back within about 2.5 years, which to me sounded like a great investment just off the cash flow itself. So at the time, I was more cash flow driven as compared to equity because, again, real estate was all new to me. I had no idea of how equity worked, how the appreciation. I was just worried about the money coming in on a monthly basis.
Right.
And that was driving my first couple of deals.
What did you pay for that first property?
So the asking price at that property at the time was about $400,000. This was a 4-unit, and I was able to negotiate it down to $368. Basically, I came in at $375, and on the sales contract, we put, I don't remember the exact wording, but basically the price was going to be contingent based on the appraisal. And the appraisal came in at $368, and the seller was willing to negotiate down to that price. So at the time, I bought the property at market value.
And what were the total rents for that property?
So the total rent of that property at the time varied. I had 2 1-bedrooms and 2 2-bedrooms. So in total, I was collecting about $5,000 in gross.
Wow. Okay. That's really good. So then you put down 20% for your down payment?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So you get that property up and running. How long did it take you before you bought property number 2?
So as soon as I closed property number 1, rented out, and I had the first month of cash flow, I thought to myself, okay, I got to jump on more. I can't waste any time. I felt like I came across a gold mine that no one was pretty much, taking advantage of in this market. So property 1 closed in February, and I closed on property 2 May of that same year. So I want to say right around March, April, I was already in contract for the second one.
And did you have the cash to come up with another down payment? Like, was that cash just in your account?
So it was a little bit of the cash in my account and my 401k. So with my W-2 job, you're able to borrow up to $50,000 off of your 401k.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's tax-free money, and any interest paid on that goes back into your account. So I felt, what better way of using that money than to leverage it and make more money off of that. So that's where I leveraged my 401k and used that to help for the down payment for property number 2.
And I think an important distinction, just for anyone listening, is that you didn't take the money. This wasn't a withdrawal from your 401k. This was a loan, which is different. So there's no tax consequence. But I think that's a great way to come up with the money. And then, so number 3, is this the next property? Was that also a turnkey property?
So number 3 was also a turnkey as well. Yes.
Okay. And then when did you start getting into BRRRR properties?
So I started, depends who you, it's all about perspective. So when I got to property 4, I was kind of pretty much tapped out. I did not have enough funds for another, $80,000 payment. But at the time, my other properties have gone up in about 100K of equity in a matter of a year. So I went in and went back to property number 2 that appraised the most. And I did a cash out refinance on that property about little over a year after owning it. So the proceeds of that cash out refinance for property number 2 helped me get into property number 4. And again, I wouldn't say that's depends who you ask. That's kind of the BRRRR method, but in essence, I did not get into that property with hard money.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, I looked at it and said, all right, house number 2, if I do a cash out refinance, I'm getting a good chunk of money, more than enough for a down payment for my next house. But my mortgage is going to go up about $400. But I said, you know what? There's no issue of me having less cash flow on that property because that's going to open the door for another property that's going to cash flow much more. So that's what helped me drive my decision making in taking on more debt because I knew I was going to get more cash flow out of it.
And, I think that's really the magic of rental properties. And it's something that it's really hard to plan for. But as you start to build up equity in properties, it really, like, being able to tap into that equity and buy something else is really, I think, the greatest way to grow your portfolio. But I think the difficult thing is you can't plan on that. Like, you don't know when that equity is going to happen. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, my first handful of properties, I don't want to say I didn't have a plan in place, but I was just going after the cash flow.
Yeah.
And then I quickly realized, you know what, I have to start thinking outside the box because there's only so much cash I can come up with. And the great thing is, whenever I would travel to these properties, it's an hour drive. So we're looking at about a 2-hour time window each day every time I go out there. So I started investing that 2-hour drive into listening into podcasts about real estate. And that's what just opened up my mind to evolving myself into different and more productive strategies when it came to investing in real estate. And, kudos to you, Dan. You're actually one of the podcasts that I was listening to on those road trips up to Connecticut. And a lot of your guests opened up my mind to, the BRRRR strategies, looking at appreciation, and all those great things that I've helped adapt to my strategies today.
I love it. All right. So as you've continued to build out your portfolio, have you used cash out refis? Has that been where you're getting the money from?
Yes. So half of my portfolio to date have been successful home run BRRRRs. So I bought the property using hard money, only about a 10% down payment, which was far less than the turnkey properties that I was buying initially. And once it was rehabbed, rented out at the closing table for refinancing, I was able to get my whole initial down payment back. And that money, I just use it to go on to the next property and so forth.
Has it been challenging to find contractors? I mean, so you're, like you just said, I mean, it's not like you can run over and meet a contractor or talk to a contractor. It's a big commitment to go up and visit your rental properties. Has it been hard to work with contractors with the distance?
So I feel like I've been lucky in that aspect. One of my first tenants has actually been my contractor, and I've been using him since day one, and it's been amazing. I was hesitant of using him at first because I just felt, mixing my tenant with my business and having him know what my whole portfolio was like, I felt was kind of risky. But at the same time, because I've heard of so many horror stories with contractors, I felt that it was a wise decision knowing that I already had somewhat of a rapport with him, and I decided just to use him little by little. I had him go out to properties and fix the clogged toilets or maybe some electrical issues. And when I saw how responsive, how responsible, and how well his craftsmanship was, that's where I decided to give him my full projects where full rehabs, guts, you name it. I gave it all to him.
And so most of the properties you're buying, are they gut rehabs?
Yes. So my first 4 properties were all turnkey, and the last 6 have been all full rehabs.
Has it been has there been any challenge in doing that? Because when you're buying a property that doesn't need any rehab, I mean, it's relatively simple, but getting involved in a rehab it's expensive. I mean, you're constantly putting out money. It takes time. Has there been any frustration?
No, thankfully not. Again, because of the great relationship with my contractor, he's helped me walk out a few properties that I've been considering buying. And I want to say I've done over a dozen walkouts with him, to the point where I felt comfortable enough doing my own estimates. It's kind of the thing where I've always looked over his shoulder, shadowing him, seeing how everything works and where he gets his budgets, his estimates from. And we've been pretty much spot on. I mean, if anything, I've always, when I presented my construction rehab budget to my hard money lender, I'm always budgeting about 15% over what I need. And to date, I have not gone over that number.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Now, are you managing all the properties yourself?
Yes, I am. I am a one-man show at the moment. Managing 29 doors can be a bit overwhelming for some folks, but I think if you have the right system and processes in place, I think it's just going to run very smoothly. I mean, it's all about the culture that you instill with your tenants too. So one of the things I always like to do, when I screen my tenants, vet them very well, make sure that everything checks out, there's no red flags, I feel comfortable renting out to that tenant. When the day comes and I give them the keys, it's always, I give them the key, hey, congratulations, welcome to your new home. First order of business, don't ever call me. And I always get the same shocked or look of expression on their faces, because they say, wait a minute, you're my landlord, so what happens? Who am I? I say, listen, I understand things are bound to break or need fixing. I totally get it, and I reason with you. When those moments do come, please text me. Do not call me. Because I feel if you open up that line of communication and have them comfortable calling you, they're going to call you at the spur of the moment or call you constantly. But if they have to text you about it, they might think twice, and next thing you know, maybe it's something that they don't need you at all. And that saved me from a ton of headaches. And the moments that I do get the text messages, hey, my toilet's clogged, or hey, there's no power on this side of the house, I'll just take that text message, forward it over to my contractor and say, hey, can you take care of this for me, please?
Yeah, I mean, that's smart. I mean, a text message is so much less disruptive, too, than getting a phone call. So I think that keeps your sanity. Well, what have you found is the best place to find tenants?
So actually, Facebook. I am a big fan of Facebook Marketplace. I go in on Facebook and make my ad on my apartment. I put my pictures on, the description. I try to be as detailed as I can in the description. And mind you, I do get a lot of inquiries, but I do a kind of a copy and paste where what I have in the description, I paste it in the initial conversation with an inquiry. Because what happens is a lot of folks on these platforms, they just look at the pictures, they look at the price, and they reach out to you right away without reading the description. Mm-hmm. So I literally just copy and paste the description, not the whole thing, just the main thing where I ask for, one of my big things, I ask for 2 months security deposit and first month's rent and proof of income. Now, I want to say once I send that out, maybe less than half respond back. So it's a good way of weeding out the folks that are interested or weeding out the folks that won't qualify for my units.
And then how do you do showings? I mean, with you being so far away, how do you do that?
So I do showings usually off hours, off working hours, off business hours, because most folks are working during the day. So what I typically do is I'll drive up to my market sometime mid-afternoon and try to beat traffic, work off of a Starbucks there until maybe 4 or 5 o'clock hits in the afternoon when I'm done with my work and I know most people are going to be available. And I do showings as that. So I try to do about 2 to 3 showings a week. It varies. And I try to put them all in the same time window, because what I've learned also is I'm a big proponent of respecting everyone's time, and I try to be on time for everyone. And the reality is, when you're dealing with tenants that are looking for apartments, in my case, mostly all of them are never on time. So what I like to do is I'll just take about 4 or 5 people and I'll put them on the same exact time slot, let's say 5 o'clock. And out of the 4 or 5, maybe one will show up right at 5 o'clock, and the rest will trickle in right after 5:10, 5:15, even 5:30. So that helps manage my time a lot more efficiently, and I know what to expect when I schedule these showings.
What a great success story. Congratulations, Louis, on everything you've accomplished with your rentals. If anyone wants to reach out to Louis, I've got his contact information on the website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 480. If Louis inspired you and you're ready to buy your first property or you want to add to your portfolio, reach out to Chaley Ridge. She's a nationwide lender. Her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she can find something that'll work for you in your situation. If you want to find out more or you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley personally, you can track her down at ridgelendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Make sure you hit the follow button, and that way you'll be notified the next time a new episode comes out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.